Hey guys, Jules here with Ableton Tips, and today we're going to be remaking a section of Stephan Bodzin's Singularity, and it sounds like this. Okay, so first up we're going to be remaking the bass, and we're just going to make a new channel, new Midi channel, and we're going to be using analog for this. So let's drag analog onto channel. And before we lay down the Midi, I'm just going to lower the frequency on the filter here. So I'm just going to drag this down a bit. And we're just going to sequence out the Midi with this initialized patch here. And then once we've got that, we can shape the sound. Okay, so the progression goes from F sharp. So we just lay down a note here at F sharp. And then we're going up to C sharp. And then up another octave to the next C sharp. And then we're going back down here to A sharp. And we just need to get that timing right. You can see here between the original file and this one, these notes aren't lining up. So we just got to zoom in here, and this one shifts over. And this one also shifts over. I think this one shifts over a little bit less. Okay. And then on the next repetition, I'm just going to duplicate this. This note is coming in a little bit earlier here. Going up to the D sharp. And then we go up to the D sharp here. Do-wee-do-do. Okay, then we're coming down to the C sharp. And back down to the A sharp. So let's just hear that and make sure it sounds right. Yep, that's correct. Okay, and then we are basically just duplicating this section again. So let's just hit Control D, or we can just drag this out if the loop function is on here. Just drag this out. I'm going to hit Control J just to consolidate this MIDI clip. And then we have all our MIDI laid out over here. Okay, so now we're going to just go in and work on the sound. Okay, so the first very important step is that we have to make the synth mono and legato. The reason for that is glide will not work unless we have set the synth up to be in mono. And we also won't be able to bend up notes into each other without the envelopes resetting unless we have legato enabled. So to enable mono and analog, we just go in and click on this tab over here, and we set the voices to mono. Okay, and that won't sound any different now, but that does allow us to add some glide. So let's just turn on glide, and we're going to set that to 62%. And then the next thing we're going to do is enable legato on the filter and on the amp envelope. So if we click on amp over here, we're going to turn on legato. And on the filter, we're also going to turn on legato. And what this is doing, I'll show you quickly, is that now if we have these notes overlapping. If we just pay attention to how they sound, we can hear now the start of the note doesn't have any attack with legato enabled. And that's because the notes are touching each other. So if I turn off legato, you'll hear they have like a little quick punchy attack. If I turn it on, we now hear them going into each other without the envelope on the filter or the amp resetting. And that's exactly what we want. However, we don't want this to happen. We don't want this to happen at every step. If we just listen to the original, we can hear this one is resetting, but that one isn't. And neither is that one. So we just need to inspect this and see how it was set up. You can see I made a gap between this note and this note so that there was a reset, and then there's no gap between these two. So let's just go back down in here and we can set that up. So we're going to just zoom in a little bit and just make a little gap here. And here these notes are already overlapping. So now that should sound right. And then another quick thing was that I also had the first note bending up. So we need to just double click here and add note at A sharp. And we need to just make a little space over there. So now these will bend into each other. Okay, then let's just pitch this oscillator down 1 octave. -1. And we're also going to turn off oscillator 2. We don't need to hear this oscillator. Okay, next up we're going to go to our amp envelope. And we're just going to bring up this point over here. I'm just going to drag it to the top because we want the note to be completely sustained. I don't want there to be like a decay in volume after the note hits. We're going to be mostly controlling that decay with the filter. Okay, now we're going to go back into our filter and we're just going to bring down the frequency down to 100, around 100 here. So now you can hear that's nice and dark, and I'm just going to turn up the volume here on my channel. And we need to bring up the envelope amount just so that the filter opens up a little bit more. So I'm going to bring that up to about 5.5. And then we just need to shape this envelope. Okay, so I'm going to make the attack about 23 milliseconds. So that's 0.023. And the decay is going to be 3.83. Okay, and then we also need to bring down this sustain here. At the moment it's set to 0.5. We want it all the way down to 0. So that the sound starts off bright and then it gets really dark. And it's basically just sub. Next I'm going to boost the sub. So we're going to grab an EQ8 and we're just going to use this low shelf and we're going to boost it by about 8 dB, around 100 Hertz, more or less. Just want the low end to be nice and beefy here. Especially on this note, you'll hear it. Nice and deep. Okay, and then another thing to note is that on this repetition of this little phrase over here, there's a slight difference in the original. Here we can see we have these two notes overlapping, so they're doing some legato, but in the original, these two notes do not overlap. So we'd be getting a reset between both of them. So I need to shift that back and this one back a little bit. Okay, that gap is a little bit big, so I'm just going to... Okay, then we also just need to work on the legato between these notes on this phrase and on this phrase. So on this one, we've got a little gap over here so that the envelopes are resetting, a gap over here, and we've also got a gap over here, but no gap over there. And then when this phrase over here repeats over here, it's going to be slightly different. I'm just going to copy all the MIDI over here and paste it. In this repetition, there's a bit of an overlap over here so that we have that legato between these two notes and these two notes. So this is a great example of how you can create small variations just using like overlapping notes and note lengths and glide. And speaking about glide, you'll see here in the original bass patch, we've got the analog glide time being automated between 62% and 0. And that's because not every single note is gliding into each other. There are some notes that don't have any glide. So let's just go through and set that up. We're going to click on time so that we have our little envelope. And I'm just going to zoom in over here and highlight this section. Click on this one and drag it down to 0. And now we can just listen to that. Yeah, so we've got glide between these two notes, but no glide on that note. And that's what we are achieving with this automation. And then over here, we don't want any glide at the start of this note. We don't want them to bend into each other. So I'm just going to highlight over here and bring that down again. And then over here, we've got no glide at the start of this note. Oopsie. We've got no glide in between these two notes either. And we've got no glide between these two. So just to check that. Okay, and then same thing over here, no glide there. I think that these two are the same. So I'm just going to copy this little bit over here and just paste it. And these two are the same, I believe. Okay, then another thing to take note of is that the envelope amount, if you look at the original over here, we can see that's being automated, but only very slightly. It's moving from 5.55 up to 6.19 and then back down to 5.87. So it's only a very slight automation, but it does make the synth a little bit brighter if we compare this phrase, for example, to this one. It is slightly brighter. And this one. Yeah. Okay, so we're just going to automate that quickly. I'm going to come back into our new synth and we're going to click on our filter. We're going to click on the envelope amount. I'm just going to make a point here. Oops. Click and make a point here. And then we're going to drag this one up to like a little bit. We're just going to drag this one up a little bit and then drag this one down a touch. Okay, and if you want to get granular, like you don't want it to drag so far and so quick, you can always click and hold and hit Control and Shift at the same time, and then that should allow you to drag it slowly up and down. So I'm just going to bring this back down to like 5.7 or so. Okay, and then that should be this synth setup. Let's just hear how it sounds. Okay, so now you can hear there was already a problem over here. These two notes, this note isn't resetting, so that means the notes are touching. So we just need to make a little gap here because we want the legato to reset basically. And let's just zoom in here and listen to this one. Okay, so we also need to make some gaps between these two. And I'm guessing we need to do it here too. Okay, so now let's just hear this whole sequence again. Okay, great. So that's our main lead setup. Next up is the arpeggio, and it sounds like this. Okay, so for this we're also using analog, so I'm just going to grab analog again, double click on that, and I'm also just going to bring down the frequency because I want it to be quite dark. And we're just going to place our notes here, so it goes F, A sharp, F, A sharp, and then A sharp, F sharp, F, and then A sharp again. And that note is the same length as this one, so we just drag this one across. And then that sequence pretty much just repeats over and over. So I'm just going to hit Control D all the way across. And that should be it. Okay, and then we're just going to duplicate this whole piece over here. And the difference between these two sections over here is that here we are moving the A sharp note. So if I just click on this box over here, it'll highlight all of them and I can just shift them down. We're going to shift them down to G sharp. And you'll notice that in the original over here, we're starting on the G sharp. Over here, we started on the F. And that's because all I've done is just duplicated this over and it's kept the timing of this exact ARP. So what we need to do is just double click here. I'm going to highlight everything here. So just hit Control A and then slide it back so that our ARP is starting here on the G sharp. And we just need to make sure that it's running through to the end here. So that's just another thing that's quite interesting actually about this ARP is the way it resets and at what point it resets. So here you can see if I had to join these clips together by hitting Control J, we can see that the ARP is like starting a little bit early. So it's not coming in at what I would consider the beginning of the phrase, which would be the A sharp. It's actually starting on the F. So it's coming in a little bit out of time. And then it keeps going. It doesn't reset. It keeps just going through this section. And then as we get to this next section, we're starting again on the F. So this entire pattern is just resetting. Okay, and that sounds like this. Okay, but now we just need to work on the sound design of this. So first thing we're going to do is just bring down the frequency here to 550. The envelope's going to be down to 1.31. And then we're just going to bring up the sustain a little bit here to 0.85. And the decay is going to be at 1.72. And then we're going to go here into the amp envelope and we're just going to bring it up so it's a fully sustained sound. A little bit of processing. We're just going to add the hybrid reverb here. So search hybrid. And we're going to bring the dry wet down to 37%. Just go into the EQ here and just take out some of that low end. Okay, then I'm just going to bring that frequency down a little bit more. Make it slightly darker. Okay, and together with the bass sound, sounds like this. Okay, this is a little bit loud, so I'm just going to bring down the volume here. Okay, so for our closed hat, we're going to be making a new MIDI channel. And we're just going to zoom in here so that we're highlighting just one beat. And I can just double click to add that MIDI channel. Then I'm going to add a note here on each 16th. And we're just going to drag this out to cover the full length of our sequence here. Okay, then we're just going to go into Deep Premium Volume 5 here. And we're going to search for one shot. We're going to go to hats. And it's hat 10 that I used. So I'm just going to double click on that. And that sounds like this. It's a bit loud, so I'm just going to bring down the volume. Okay, then we want to give some life to this hat. So I'm going to go into controls and I'm going to add some random pan to it so it can like pan around a little bit. And if we look at the original, I actually automated this pan amount to come up every once in a while from 16% up to 44%. So let's just do that and see how it sounds. So I'm going to click here on random pan and then we're going to add a little point here, bring that up. And now you can hear that when it runs over the section, the panning goes a little bit more crazy and the hats kind of go all over the place. And I'm just going to duplicate this a few times out here. So we've got this automation across here. Okay, and then lastly, I found this hat to be a little bit too deep for the style. One way to fix that would be to just EQ it, but I found that pitching it actually sounded better. So I'm just going to go in here, click on the transpose over here and pitch it up 2 semitones. Okay, then I'm going to go into the MIDI clip here and just adjust the velocity so that the hat has a little bit of, just humanize a little bit so that the velocities are not all exactly the same. And I'm just going to hold Alt and click and drag this down. Let's make it down to like 60 over here. And then bring this one a little bit louder. This one's going to be our loudest hat, and then this one's going to be a little bit quieter. And now that should give it a little bit of bounce too. Okay, so now we've got our hat set up, and we've got our ARP and our bass, and we've got sounding like this. Next up is this percussive sound. And it sounds like this. So we're just going to make a new audio channel, and then we're going to go into our D Premium Volume 5 here and just search for this specific perk, this one. And this took a little bit of playing around with the volumes and the timing to just get it sounding similar to the original. It's not exactly the same, but it does give off the same vibe. So here you can see these hits have all been manually changed in volume. And that kind of just makes it feel like it's being played by a human. So I'm just going to duplicate this out a bunch of times. And the last one we're going to stretch it out to its full length. And then you'll see that these are 2 different lengths, and that's because I pitched this down 6 semitones. So I'm just going to go in here and highlight all of them. And we just listen to this quickly. I'm going to bring down the volume. So if we just grab this and pitch it down -6, makes it nice and deep. And then we're going to go in and just adjust the volumes manually. So I'm just going to drag all of them down to start. And then I'm just going to adjust each one manually here. Bring this one up maybe to -8. This one can be a little bit louder. This one can be, let's make it like about that loud. I'm kind of just doing this visually, just making sure that each of them are slightly different. Bring that one up a bit. Okay, then that sounds like this. Okay, then next thing we are adding is just a bit of reverb. I love this hybrid reverb, so I'm just going to use this one. And we're going to bring up the dry wet a bit here. I'm going to go into the EQ and just take out some of the low end. And I'm also going to take out some of the high end. And I can click on this number 4 here and just change the type to a low pass filter. And just drag this down to 1K. Okay, then you can see there's also a bit of automation on the panning. So just click on this panning on the insert. And we're going to drag this up to 24 around there. Bring this down and then bring this one back up, more or less center. And that sounds like this. So now we've got a little bit of movement. And that's sounding nice and humanized. And now we're just going to take this and copy it over into each section. All right. Next up is another perk. And this is kind of just almost like a response to this one. So each one is, we're not just repeating this over and over again. It adds a little bit more life into our groove to have a different one. And this one sounds like this. And I did this one using Midi just because I wanted to use the random pan over here. So I'm just going to go in and create a new Midi channel here. And I'm going to add a Midi clip. We're just going to place a note on each 16th. Okay, and we're going to be using Tom 22 from D Premium. Just double click on that. And now this sounds like this. Very robotic, and we need to change that. So the first thing I'm going to do is just make this one shot so that the note isn't being cut short. If you set it to classic, as soon as that MIDI clip stops playing, the tom will just cut off immediately and it'll just sound a bit unnatural. So we just want to change that to one shot. And we're going to bring down the volume here a bit. Okay, then I want to go in and just change the velocities here. I kind of want it to rise up in velocity, just like we have done over here. So it's rising up, and then this is the loudest note, and then a little bit quieter. I'm going to highlight all of these. I'm going to hit B on my keyboard. So we've got the pencil icon, and then I'm going to hold Control and click and drag this up to there. And we just need to fix this one, bring it back down. And then this one I'm going to bring up a slight bit. So now we should hear it sounding a little bit more human. Okay, but that's not all that I changed. I also automated the transpose here. So I'm just going to click on transpose. And over here we're going to have it at 0. And over here we're going to have it at -2. And then I'm going to hit B again and just bring this down to -1. And that's how this sounds. Okay, and then we're going to add a little bit of delay with the low feedback here. Let's bring it down to there, and then we're also going to bring down the dry wet. And I'm also going to make this a little bit darker by just clicking and dragging this point down. And we're going to make this ping pong. Cool, then it kind of like rings out and bounces around a bit. Okay, and then I found to just leave it like this, it felt like it was sticking out of the mix a bit too much. So I'm just going to add some EQ. And I'm going to just change this to a low pass. And we're going to drag this down to around 1K. So it's nice and dark. And I don't want all this sub in the tom either, because I don't want it to interfere with the bass and the kick. So I'm just going to shelf off some of this down here. Okay, and then if we have a look at this, you can see I actually automated the gain on the EQ. So this tom gets louder and louder. At its quietest, it's -4.3, and then at its loudest, it's at 0. So let's just duplicate this out. And then we're going to click on the gain here. And we're just going to drag this point down to around -4. Okay, so everything is constantly changing. Toms are getting louder, synths are being automated, and that's my biggest takeaway from remaking this, is that just everything is just breathing and moving and changing. Okay, and before we continue, I just wanted to say, if you're enjoying the video, please consider supporting us at productionmusiclive.com, and also drop a comment, like, and subscribe to the channel. Okay, so at the moment we've got our percussion set up, we've got our hats, we've got our ARP, and we've got our bass sound. And together they're sounding like this so far. Okay, great. So all that's left is pretty much our clap and our kick. Okay, so there's actually quite a lot of detail in the clap loop. I'll just play a small section of this for you. The first thing I'm going to do is just create 2 new audio channels. I'm going to group them together by hitting Control G. And the first clap we're going to be using is the 808 clap, and that comes stock with the Ableton Live Suite. So if we just go into samples here and we search clap 808, and I'm just going to drag this down onto our second audio channel here. And we're just going to pitch this one down -5. And I'm also going to turn down the volume of it. It's a bit loud at the moment. Okay, and then I'm going to duplicate this one. And this one is going to be pitched up to 2 semitones. So I'm going to go up to 2 here. So the first clap sounds like this, and then like this. And we're just going to alternate between these. So I'm just going to duplicate that again, and again. And then we're going to, okay, and then I'm going to take this clap that's been pitched down 5 semitones, and I'm just going to Control drag it across to duplicate it. I'm going to make it a little bit shorter, and then drag it here onto this beat. And we're going to just bring down the volume of it. And this is going to be like almost like a ghost groove clap. And just drag that out. And then I'm going to control and drag this again over here. So now we've got this. And this one we're going to pan left. So let's just click here and we can click here and just bring down this panning of it all the way down. And we just want to make sure that this is sitting here in the center. And then I'm going to duplicate out this entire sequence. Okay, then the next clap we're going to be using is this D Premium Volume 5, Clap 3, Cutting 6. Cutting 6. That should find it for us. There we go. Okay, then this one we're not doing any changes to the pitch or anything. We're just going to place it on every second clap here, like this. I'm just going to bring down the volume a bit and balance them. Okay, and again over there. Okay, then I'm just going to select all of these and duplicate them. Okay, so we're going to actually have two reverbs on here. The first reverb is just basically going to be our room reverb, just to put the claps like into a space. I'm going to use hybrid again. Okay, and then I'm going to change the algorithm here to quartz. Change the blend here to 100% to use the algorithm instead of the convolution. And I want to bring down the decay quite short. Okay, then I'm just going to bring down the dry wet to around 20%-ish. I'm going to go into the EQ here and just take out some of the high end over here. And I'm also going to take out this mid-range. I don't want the reverb to be happening in the mid-range. Mostly it's just the top end of the clap. So it's very subtle, but if I turn it off and turn it back on, you'll hear it. Okay, next up is this delay that I have set up. This delay is really just to repeat the clap and kind of give it a bit of a groove and a bounce. So we're going to go ahead into delay. And we're going to leave it on 3 here. And we're not going to be using ping pong, so pretty much leaving it exactly as it is. And I only want the clap to repeat once. So with the delay at 50%, it kind of bounces too many times. So I'm going to bring it down to 0 so it only happens once. And we don't want it to be happening on every single clap. You can see here I've been automating it on and off. So I only really want it to happen on the first clap of each sequence. So here we're going to be automating the delay on and off here. So let's just click on this button here and we're going to switch it off over here. Oops. And then I'm just going to duplicate this automation over and over again. Okay, the delayed clap is also a bit loud, so we can just bring down the dry wet. Last thing we're going to add is this hybrid reverb that's just creating this kind of big gated reverb on the first clap of each sequence. So we're just going to go in here and click on hybrid. Hybrid reverb. And the idea here is to make this really like bright reverb. It's kind of long, but it gets gated, so it kind of like sucks in and then disappears. So for this, I'm going to be using the shimmer algorithm. And if we just hear how that sounds, it's quite bright, but I want it even brighter. I'm going to go into the EQ here and just boost the top end. Okay, so that's like a really long, bright reverb. Take out some of the low end too. And if we automate this, we can click on the dry wet here, and we're just going to fade it in manually here. So it comes kind of, we hear the original clap, but then this big reverb tail. And this one's set to 42%, so I'm just going to bring it down a little bit here. And then we gate it and cut it off. So that sounds like this. Okay, That's perfect. Then I'm just going to duplicate this out across. And now our clap sounds like this. Okay, so next up is the kick, and this is an easy one. So for this, we're just using, what is it, kick deep 21. And I'm just going to make a new MIDI channel. Just drag this kick out here. And we're just going to set the volume down to -7.8. And we're just going to place a kick here on every beat. The kick comes in a little bit later. So we're just starting here. And we're going to duplicate this kick out all the way up to here. So there's no kick at the end, no kick at the beginning. Okay, then we've got these little ghost kicks. So all I'm going to do is just grab this kick, copy it across over here, and I'm just going to bring down the volume of it a bit. And I want this to be happening here. And I'm just going to select these two bars here and just duplicate them so that we get that kick all the way across there. And that's our kick. And then the last thing I'm going to do is just add this tom here at the end. It's kind of optional, but in the original you do hear the tom over there. And I have a feeling that it's actually the tom that's being used as the ghost kick. But as I said, I prefer the sound of the kick, but I'm still going to add the tom at the end. So a really simple one. We're just going to make a new channel over here and search for tom 4. This one. Just place it right here at the end. And just cut that off. And bring down the volume a bit. And then it's just been pitched down into key. Okay, so lastly, we do need to add a little bit of sidechain to this bass line. So I'm just going to use a compressor for this, and I think the sidechain's super minimal, like you're not hearing this big pumping sidechain. Let's just click the sidechain over here and set it to our kick. And I just want some very gentle sidechain. Okay, and let's just listen through to make sure everything sounds okay. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. If you found it useful, please consider supporting us at productionmusiclive.com and leave us a comment, like, and subscribe. Thank you and goodbye.